The same man who once threw his desperate brother out of his $1,000,000 office was now standing outside that brother's humble gate, begging for the very help he had refused to give. Sometimes, the person you look down on is the one you need the most. The sound of expensive leather shoes clicked against the marble floor as Samuel walked through his luxurious office building. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, announcing his success to the world. The smell of fresh coffee and polished wood filled the air, mixing with the scent of his imported cologne. Everything around him screamed wealth, from the golden elevator doors to the crystal chandelier hanging above the reception area. Samuel Johnson had worked hard to build his construction company from nothing. Now, at 35, he owned the tallest building in the city center. His bank account had more zeros than he could ever have imagined as a young boy selling oranges on the dusty streets of his hometown. But success had changed Samuel. The humble boy who once shared his last coin with street children was now a man who counted every penny twice. His heart had grown as cold as the air conditioning in his corner office. That Tuesday morning, as Samuel reviewed contracts worth millions, his secretary knocked on his door. "Sir, your brother James is here to see you." Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew why James was here again. James walked in, his clothes wrinkled and his shoes worn out from walking the streets looking for work. The contrast between the two brothers was painful to see. Where Samuel's skin glowed from expensive treatment, James looked tired and defeated. Where Samuel's belly showed signs of good living, James had grown thinner from eating 1 meal a day. "Brother, please," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been looking for work for 8 months now. My wife is pregnant and we have nothing. Can you give me any job in your company? I'll sweep floors, I'll carry cement bags, anything." Samuel looked at his younger brother with cold eyes. The same eyes that once sparkled with love now showed only disgust. "James, how many times must we have this conversation? I didn't become successful by giving handouts to lazy people." "But I'm your brother, Samuel. We came from the same mother's womb." "That doesn't mean I owe you anything." Samuel's voice was sharp like a knife cutting through the air. "Everyone must hustle for themselves in this world. If I can make it from selling oranges to owning this empire, what's stopping you?" James felt his heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. The brother who used to protect him from bullies, who shared his school lunch when James forgot his, was now looking at him like a stranger. But Samuel wasn't finished. His pride had taken over completely, making him say words that would haunt him forever. Subscribe now to see how this family betrayal unfolds. You won't believe what happens next. "You see this office?" Samuel stood up, spreading his arms wide. "You see these awards on the wall? I earned every single one through sweat and sacrifice, not by begging my relatives for help." James swallowed hard, tasting the salt of tears he refused to let fall. "Samuel, I'm not asking you to give me money for free. Just give me work. Let me earn my bread with dignity." Samuel laughed bitterly. "Dignity? Where was your dignity when you dropped out of university to chase after that girl? Where was your dignity when you spent years drinking instead of building a future?" Each word hit James like a physical blow. Yes, he had made mistakes in his youth, but he had changed. He had stopped drinking, he had married his girlfriend, and now they were expecting their first child. But Samuel saw none of this growth. "I know I made mistakes, brother, but people can change. I've changed." "Have you?" Samuel's eyes were like burning coals. "Then why are you here begging instead of working?" "Because no one will give me a chance. Every job interview, they ask for experience I don't have, connections I've lost, recommendations from people who no longer remember my name." Samuel walked to his window, looking down at the busy street below. From up here, people looked like ants, small and insignificant. "That's not my problem, James. In this world, only the strong survive. The weak get left behind." "So you are leaving me behind? Your own blood?" Samuel turned around, his face harder than the concrete he used to build his empire. I'm teaching you to stand on your own feet. Today you want a job. Tomorrow you want money. Next week you want a house. Where does it end? James felt something dying inside his chest. The last thread of hope was being cut by his own brother's scissors. Samuel, my wife, she's 7 months pregnant. We have no money for the hospital when the baby comes. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to have children you cannot afford. The words hung in the air like poison. James stared at his brother, seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. This man who looked like Samuel, sounded like Samuel, but had no trace of the loving brother he once knew. Please, just this once. Help me this one time, and I promise I will never ask you for anything again. Samuel walked back to his desk and sat down, not even looking at James anymore. Security will escort you out. And James, he finally looked up, his eyes colder than morning frost. Don't come back here again. You are embarrassing me in front of my employees. But James had one more card to play, one last desperate attempt that would either save him or destroy what little remained of their brotherhood. James dropped to his knees right there in the expensive office, his pride crashing to the floor like broken glass. Samuel, I'm begging you. I'm on my knees begging you. Remember when we were children? When Mama died and left us alone, we promised each other we would always take care of each other. We swore on her grave. Samuel's hand froze on the telephone he was about to use to call security. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a memory of 2 young boys standing beside a fresh grave, holding hands and making promises with tears streaming down their faces. But the moment passed quickly. Samuel's heart had grown too hard for memories to crack it open. Get up, James. You are making a fool of yourself. I don't care. James's voice broke like a dam bursting. Let me be a fool if it means my wife and unborn child will have food to eat. Samuel, we are all the family we have left in this world. If you don't help me, who will? That's exactly my point, Samuel said, standing up again. In this life, you can only depend on yourself. The sooner you learn that lesson, the better. James slowly got to his feet, his knees shaking, not from fear, but from hunger. You know what hurts the most, Samuel? It's not that you won't give me money, it's that you won't even give me a chance to work for it. I've heard enough. Samuel pressed the button to call security. This conversation is over. 2 security guards appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable. They knew James from his previous visits and felt sorry for him, but they had jobs to protect. As the guards gently took his arms, James looked at his brother one last time. Samuel, I want you to remember this moment. Remember it well. The day will come when you will understand what it feels like to be desperate, to have nowhere to turn. And on that day, you remember how you treated your own brother. Samuel laughed coldly. That day will never come, James. I'm too smart, too prepared. I have investments, savings, backup plans for my backup plans. I will never be like you. We shall see, James said quietly, as the guards led him toward the door. We shall see. But as James reached the doorway, he turned back and said something that would plant a seed of unease in Samuel's heart. Brother, success is like a tall tree. The higher it grows, the harder it falls when the wind comes, and the wind always comes. Samuel watched his brother disappear into the elevator, and for just a moment, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine, but he shook it off, telling himself it was just the air conditioning. He had no idea that fate was already preparing a storm that would test every word he had just spoken. 5 years passed like pages in a book. Samuel's empire grew even bigger. His buildings reached higher into the sky, and his bank account swelled like a river during the rainy season. He had forgotten about James and their last conversation, pushing it deep into the corners of his mind where uncomfortable memories go to die. But life has a way of reminding us of the words we speak in anger. It started with a phone call on a Monday morning. Samuel was in his office, reviewing plans for another skyscraper, when his lawyer called with news that made his blood freeze in his veins. Samuel, we have a problem. A big problem. The government had discovered that one of Samuel's biggest projects, a hospital he had built 3 years ago, had used fake materials. The concrete was mixed with sand instead of proper cement. The steel beams were hollow instead of solid, and the foundation was built on land that hadn't been properly tested for stability. The hospital had collapsed during a small earthquake, killing 12 people and injuring over 50 others. But I trusted my site manager with everything, Samuel said, his hands shaking as he held the phone. I never supervised the actual construction. That's the problem, Samuel. The law says the owner is responsible for everything that happens on his construction site. You are facing criminal charges for negligent homicide and fraud. The words hit Samuel like a physical punch. In one morning, his entire world began to crumble faster than the hospital that had fallen. Within weeks, the courts froze all his bank accounts. His properties were seized by the government. His business licenses were revoked. His employees abandoned him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The man who once walked on marble floors now found himself sitting on the cold concrete steps of the courthouse. His expensive suit replaced by the simple clothes of a man who had lost everything. The newspapers that once celebrated him as the king of construction now called him the builder of death. His face was on every front page, but this time as a criminal, not a success story. Samuel tried calling his wealthy friends, the ones who used to laugh at his jokes and compete for invitations to his parties, but their phones went straight to voicemail. Their secretaries claimed they were in meetings. Their doors, which once always opened for him, were now locked shut. As he sat on those courthouse steps, watching people walk by without recognizing the man who once owned half the city, Samuel remembered his brother's words. Success is like a tall tree. The higher it grows, the harder it falls when the wind comes. The wind had come, and Samuel was falling faster than he had ever imagined possible.
6 months after his empire collapsed, Samuel found himself living in a one-room apartment in the same poor neighborhood where him and James had grown up. The smell of kerosene lamps and cheap cooking oil filled the air, replacing the expensive perfumes of his former life. His hands, once soft from luxury, were now rough from washing his own clothes and cooking his own meals. Every morning, Samuel joined the long lines of job seekers outside factories and offices. His construction expertise meant nothing now. No one wanted to hire a man whose building had killed people. His reputation followed him like a dark shadow, whispering his failures to every potential employer. The money he had hidden from the government had run out after paying lawyer fees and court fines. Now, with hunger gnawing at his stomach like an angry animal, Samuel faced a choice he never thought he would have to make. He had to swallow his pride and ask for help. Samuel's first stop was at the bank where he used to keep millions. The manager, who once bowed to him like a king, now looked at him with the same coldness Samuel had once shown to beggars. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, but we cannot give you a loan without collateral, you understand?" Next, he tried his former business partners. They wouldn't even see him. Their secretaries, who once treated him with respect, now spoke to him like he was dirt under their shoes. As the sun set on another day of rejection, Samuel found himself walking towards a familiar neighborhood. His feet seemed to know where to go, even though his mind was fighting against it. There, in a modest but clean house, lived his brother James. Samuel stood outside the gate for an hour, watching through the windows. He could see James playing with a beautiful 5-year-old child, the baby that had been in his wife's womb all those years ago. The house was simple, but filled with laughter and love. James had found work as a mechanic and had built a small but honest life for his family. 3 times, Samuel raised his hand to knock on the gate. 3 times, he let it fall to his side. The proud man who once looked down on his brother from the window of his skyscraper now couldn't find the courage to face him. But hunger has a way of breaking down even the strongest pride. Finally, as darkness fell and his stomach cramped with emptiness, Samuel knocked on the gate. James opened it, and for a moment, both brothers just stared at each other. James saw a man he barely recognized, thin, tired, broken. Samuel saw the brother he had turned away, now healthy and content. "Hello, Samuel," James said quietly. "Hello, brother." Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. But what James said next would determine whether this story would end with forgiveness or revenge.
James looked at his brother standing in the darkness, the same man who had once thrown him out of his office like unwanted trash. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them like a bridge that could either connect them or collapse under the weight of old hurts. "You look hungry," James said finally. Samuel's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for months. "I am, brother. I am so hungry, not just for food, but for forgiveness." James stepped aside and opened the gate wider. "Come in." As they sat at James's simple wooden table, sharing a meal of rice and beans, Samuel poured out his story. He told his brother about the collapse, the debts, the lawsuits, the loss of everything he had worked for. With each word, he felt the heavy burden of his pride lifting from his shoulders. "I said terrible things to you, James. I was blind with pride and success. I forgot where I came from, and more importantly, I forgot who helped me get there. Do you remember when we were selling oranges as children? You always gave me the bigger share when we counted our money at the end of the day." James nodded, his eyes soft with memory. "I remember. You helped me with school fees when I wanted to study engineering. You encouraged me when I started my first business. But when success came, I convinced myself that I had done it all alone." Samuel's voice broke. "I was wrong, brother. I was so wrong." James's wife brought their child to meet his uncle. The little boy looked at Samuel with curious, innocent eyes, the same eyes Samuel had refused to care about 5 years ago. "His name is Samuel," James said quietly. "We named him after you." The word hit Samuel like lightning. While he was busy rejecting his brother, James had honored him by naming his son after him. The weight of this revelation broke the last of Samuel's hardened heart. "Why?" Samuel whispered. "After everything I did to you, why would you name your child after me?" James smiled, and in that smile he saw the brother he remembered from their childhood, kind, forgiving, full of love. "Because I never stopped believing that the real Samuel was still inside there somewhere. The brother who protected me, who shared with me, who promised at Mama's grave that we would always take care of each other. But I broke that promise, James. I failed you when you needed me most. We all make mistakes, brother. The question is, what do we do after we realize we're wrong?" James reached into a drawer and pulled out a small savings book. He was saving it for his son's education, but he pushed the book across the table to Samuel. "Take it. Start again." Samuel stared at the book, his hands shaking. "I can't take your child's future." "You're not taking it. You're helping to secure it. A child needs his uncle in his life. He needs his father's brother to be strong and successful, not broken and hopeless." Through his tears, Samuel saw the truth that had escaped him for so long. Real wealth wasn't in the buildings he had constructed or the money he had accumulated. Real wealth was in the relationships he had almost destroyed through his pride and selfishness. "James, I don't know how to repay you." "You already know how," James smiled. "Just remember this feeling. Remember what it is like to need help and to receive it with kindness. The next time someone comes to you desperate and broken, treat them the way you would want to be treated." Samuel nodded, finally understanding the lesson that life has spent years trying to teach him. The hand you refuse to live today might be the one you need tomorrow. Exactly. With his brother's help, Samuel started a small construction business again. But this time, everything was different. He hired people who were struggling, just like he had struggled. He paid fair wages and treated his employees like family. When people couldn't afford his services, he found ways to help them anyway. Years later, when Samuel's second business became successful,
People would often ask him why he was so generous to those in need. He would smile and tell them about his brother James and how sometimes we need to fall completely before we can learn to truly stand. The two brothers never forgot the lessons they learned during those dark days. Samuel learned that pride comes before a fall, and James learned that forgiveness has the power to rebuild what anger tears down. And little Samuel, the child who carried his uncle's name, grew up hearing the story of how two brothers lost each other to pride, but found each other again through love. The moral: the hand you refuse to lift today might be the one you need tomorrow. Success means nothing if it costs you the people that matter most. And sometimes the greatest victory is not in getting revenge on those who wronged us, but in showing them a better way through our example. What do you think about this story? Have you ever had to choose between pride and family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful African folktales that teach us lessons about life, family, and the choices that shape our destiny. These stories remind us of our shared humanity and the values that make us stronger together.